You step on them every day. You pour boiling water on them, poison them with chemicals, and squash them with your finger on the kitchen table. For you, they are just a minor household nuisance, something like dust that keeps coming back, black dots that crawl in from who knows where and for who knows what reason. You have never thought about them for more than 3 seconds in your life, and that's perfectly normal because that's how the human brain works. It doesn't waste attention on what seems insignificant. But here's the thing. Right now, while you're listening to this, beneath the asphalt of any city on the planet, a living network is at work, with a total mass of around 80 billion kilograms. That's comparable to the weight of all humanity, all the people on Earth. Every person who is currently sitting in an office, stuck in traffic, sleeping, or eating. All of this mass, and nearby, just beneath a thin layer of soil, lies an equal mass, but it consists of ants. 20 quadrillion individuals. That's a number that's hard to grasp, so let's try to think about it differently. If you could count one ant every second and never stopped for sleep, food, or anything at all, it would take you more than 600 million years to finish counting. The entire evolution of complex life on Earth would fit into that count. They live on every continent except Antarctica. They ascend 4,000 meters in the Himalayas. Their combined biomass is about 20% of the mass of all terrestrial vertebrates, all birds, all mammals, all reptiles, and amphibians combined. 1/5 of that weight is ants. And here's what should really grab your attention. When you see a dozen ants carrying a crumb of bread along a wall, you think, well, primitive insects, acting on autopilot. But once, I stood on the street and watched as a column of ants approached a crack in the sidewalk that they couldn't go around. And in just a few seconds, part of them clung to each other with their legs and bodies and formed a living bridge across that gap. The others walked across this bridge as if it were a regular road. No one was in charge. No one drew a plan. No one shouted, "You lie down here and you go there." They just did it. And the question that stuck in my mind afterward was, if one ant has a brain the size of a pinhead with only 250,000 neurons, which is 1,000,000 times fewer than yours, then who exactly made the decision to build that bridge? The answer to this question shatters the usual worldview, because the decision was not made by a single ant. The decision was made by the colony, and this is not a metaphor. It's a literal statement backed by decades of research. Deborah Gordon from Stanford University has spent more than 30 years observing ant colonies in the Arizona desert. She visited the same colonies year after year and recorded how they made decisions. When to send foragers for food, how many workers to allocate, whether to take risks on a hot day or wait. And she discovered something strange. Young colonies behaved like teenagers. They jumped at every opportunity, took risks, and wasted resources. Mature colonies acted cautiously, economically, and strategically. A colony became wiser with age. It developed something akin to character, and that character changed, from impulsive to strategic. But here's the paradox that makes you feel a bit uneasy. No single ant in the colony lives long enough to accumulate this experience. A worker ant lives 1 or 2 years. The colony lives 20, 30 years. The ants that made reckless decisions in a young colony are long dead, but the colony continues to live and learn. This means that knowledge is not stored in individual heads. It is stored in the system, in the structure of interactions, in how one ant reacts to another's actions. This principle is called Stigmergy, and it's simpler than it sounds. One ant doesn't tell another where to go. It simply leaves a chemical trail on the surface. Another ant encounters this trail and changes its behavior. A third ant finds 2 trails and reacts even more strongly. No one knows the big picture. Each reacts only to what it sees right in front of it. But from millions of such simple reactions emerges behavior that appears intelligent. And if you think this only works for insects, consider this. The entire Wikipedia is built on the same principle. One person writes an article, another sees a mistake and corrects it, a third adds to it, No one coordinates the process. No one sees the whole picture. But the result is the largest encyclopedia in human history. Ants used this algorithm 100 million years before we invented the internet. Now let's step away from abstractions and look at a specific example that clearly illustrates the scale of what we're talking about. In Southeast Asia, there are weaver ants. They build nests from living leaves on trees, and the way they do it resembles a well-choreographed performance in 3 acts. The first group of workers forms chains between the edges of the leaves and begins to pull them together. Each ant holds onto its neighbor's waist, and the entire chain functions like a living rope. Meanwhile, the second group brings larvae, its own younger sisters, from the nest and holds them in their mandibles. The larvae secrete silk threads, and the workers guide them along the edges of the leaves as if using glue guns. The third group guards the perimeter until the structure is complete. 3 different specialties, 3 parallel processes, complete synchronization, and not a single boss, not a single plan, not a single meeting. When scientists describe such behavior, they use the term superorganism, and this is not an exaggeration for a catchy headline. A superorganism is when individual beings are so deeply connected to one another that they begin to behave as a single living organism, not like a flock, not like a crowd, like one body. Think of it through another analogy. A single neuron in your brain does not think. It simply transmits an electrical signal. 10 neurons do not think either. 1,000 do not think. But 86 billion neurons, connected in a specific way, make up you. Your consciousness, your personality, your ability to understand these words right now. Similarly, a single ant is almost nothing, a tiny automaton with a simple set of reactions. But 1 million ants, connected through chemical signals, form a being with character, memory, and strategy. A being that builds, heals, fights, and makes decisions. And it is right beneath your feet at this very moment. To understand where these creatures came from and why they became what they are, one must look into a piece of amber. In the year 2016, scientists described a find from Myanmar, a drop of fossilized resin that is 99 million years old. Inside was an ant, but not one you would recognize. It had horn-like protrusions on its head, and its mandibles were curved like sickles. It was named Charata Myrmex ellenbergeri, and it bears no resemblance to any ant living today. Nothing like it remains. This means that at the very beginning of their history, ants experimented with body forms that are now completely extinct: horns, blades, structures that evolution tried and discarded. We see only those who pass the test of survival. Behind them lies a graveyard of failed projects spanning tens of millions of years. Ants belong to the same order as wasps and bees, the Hymenoptera. Their closest living relatives are not wasps in general, but one specific family, the Scolidae. However, the key difference between ants and all others in this order is not the loss of wings. They actually have wings, but only in the reproductive individuals and only during the mating flight. The true evolutionary invention that made ants what they are is a small gland in the thorax called the metapleural gland. This gland is unique to ants. No other insect on the planet has it. It produces substances that kill bacteria and suppress fungal growth. It may sound trivial, but it opened the door for ants into the underground world. When you live in a damp, dark chamber underground, where humidity is over 100% and decaying organic matter surrounds you, fungal infections are a death sentence. All other insects that tried to live this way failed, but ants carried an inbuilt first aid kit and could build entire underground cities without fear of epidemics. One organ and an entire ecological niche was in their hands. In South Australia lives an ant that entomologists searched for nearly 100 years. It is called Nothomyrmecia macrops, and when it was finally found in 1977, it turned out to be something like a living draft, a sketch of what ants were like before they became ants as we understand them. It hunts alone, at night, relying not on chemical signals, but on sight. It lives in small colonies. It hardly uses pheromones. Looking at it, you see where it all began. A solitary insect just starting to explore communal living. Between it and the colony of 1 million individuals that cultivates fungi and conducts full-scale wars lies a chasm of tens of millions of years of evolution. Now let's take a look inside the body and figure out how this machine works. An ant has no lungs. It breathes through tiny openings along its body, and air flows directly to the cells through a system of tubes. An ant has no blood in the conventional sense. Instead, a clear fluid called hemolymph flows through its body, transporting nutrients but not oxygen. However, it has 5 hearts. More precisely, these are 5 expansions of the dorsal vessel, each pushing hemolymph in one direction, like a chain of small pumps. An ant's brain contains about 250,000 neurons. This is 1 million times fewer than a human. But when you gather a colony of 1 million individuals, the total number of neurons begins to approach that of a small mammal's brain. This does not mean that the colony thinks like a rat or a cat, but it does mean that it has computational power. It's just distributed not in one skull, but across 1 million tiny bodies. And here is one of the strangest details that changes everything we understand about how a colony works. Ants feed each other mouth to mouth. This is called trophallaxis, and for a long time, it was thought to be merely a way to share food. But a study from 2020 showed that along with food, ants transfer not only nutrients and pheromones, but also microRNA molecules, tiny genetic instructions that can influence which genes are turned on and off in the recipient. Roughly speaking, the colony reprograms its members through food. When one ant feeds another, it is not just sharing lunch. It is sending a chemical letter that can alter behavior, aging speed, and even specialization of the recipient. Now let's talk about how a colony is born, and this is one of the most dramatic stories in nature. It all begins with one day each year, when winged females and males emerge from the nest. During this flight, the queen of leafcutter ants receives sperm from several males into a special organ, the spermatheca. This is not a coincidence or a result of chaotic mating, it is insurance. The genetic diversity within one future colony will be sufficient for different groups of workers to differ from each other in their resistance to various diseases. If one infection strikes the nest, some workers will survive simply because they have different fathers. After the flight, the males die. Every single one of them. Their biological task is complete, and nature has not provided for their continuation. The fertilized queen lands on the ground, breaks off her own wings, she no longer needs them, and begins to dig. Alone, in complete solitude, she excavates a chamber, seals the entrance, and lays her first eggs. She feeds the initial larvae with secretions from her own body, sometimes sacrificing part of her laid eggs as food for the others. She does not eat. She does not go outside. She uses up her fat reserves and muscle tissue from her now useless wing muscles. From this state of hunger, after a few weeks, the first workers emerge, small, weak, smaller than normal size, because resources were scarce. But they venture outside, start bringing in food, and the machine begins to run. The first 2 to 3 years, the colony undergoes what is known as the ergonomic stage, a period when every calorie goes solely towards increasing the workforce. The colony does not produce winged individuals, does not spend resources on reproduction, does nothing but grow in numbers. It resembles a startup that burns through money for growth in its early years. Only when the number of workers reaches a certain threshold, which varies by species from a few thousand to hundreds of thousands, does the system switch. The colony produces winged males and females for the first time, and the cycle closes. The nest they build is not just a burrow. In desert-dwelling leafcutter ants, Nests can extend to a depth of 5 meters and contain several hundred chambers. The temperature above can fluctuate by 40 degrees in a single day, while at depth, it remains stable. Ants transport larvae and pupae between levels daily, following the zone of optimal 28 to 30 degrees. In the morning, the brood is closer to the surface, where it is warmer. By noon, it is moved deeper, away from the heat. Each worker follows a simple rule. If it's too hot here, take a larva and carry it down. Yet from thousands of such simple decisions, an exact climate control system emerges. And there's another detail that illustrates how complex the politics within the ant colony are. In many species, workers are theoretically capable of laying eggs, not fertilized ones, which only hatch into males, but still eggs. This is a rebellion against the system, as it is more beneficial for the colony for only the queen to reproduce. And there is police within the colony. Worker police distinguish the queen's eggs from those of other workers by their chemical scent, and destroy the illegitimate ones within a few hours. This is not cruelty. It is a mechanism that keeps the superorganism intact. Because if everyone starts working for themselves, the colony will collapse, and all will perish. You communicate with words. Ants communicate with molecules. And if you think that's more primitive, wait. Scientists have identified more than 20 different chemical compounds used for communication in the ant species Adacephalotes, the leafcutter ants, which we will discuss later. Just the Dufour's gland, a small organ in the abdomen, produces a mixture of dozens of hydrocarbons, and each combination of these substances carries a distinct message. This is not a single signal for all occasions. It is a dictionary. Alarm, food found, I belong, I am an outsider, danger to the right, the queen is alive, the queen is dead. All of this is encoded in the chemistry that fills the air of the nest and settles on every surface. But the most interesting part is not that pheromones transmit information. The most fascinating aspect is that they program behavior. A young worker ant begins its life inside the nest. Its first job is to care for the larvae and eggs. It is a nanny. After a while, its sensitivity to certain pheromones starts to decline, and it transitions to a new job: building, cleaning, transporting supplies. Then it becomes even less sensitive and moves on to the most dangerous tasks: going outside for food. Foraging is the final stage of its career, and it is also the riskiest, because outside await predators, heat, wind, and competitors. The ant takes on this job not because someone appointed it. It goes because the chemistry inside the nest gradually stops affecting it. It is driven outside not by orders, but by biology, and this is what makes this system truly resilient. If the colony loses many foragers in a single day, say they were wiped out by an anteater or caught in a downpour, the chemical balance inside the nest changes instantly. There are fewer substances that foragers bring back on their bodies, and the young workers, who were supposed to care for the larvae for several more weeks, begin to mature faster. Their sensitivity threshold drops ahead of schedule, and they venture outside, filling the empty spots. The system repairs itself, without meetings, without planning, without panic, just through chemistry. Now let's talk about those who have learned to hack this chemistry, because if you have a language that governs an entire civilization, sooner or later, someone will find a way to forge the password. In Europe lives a small, inconspicuous ant, Temnothorax nylanderi. Its colonies are tiny, consisting of just a few hundred individuals, and they nest in hollow acorns and crevices in bark. And this ant has a problem: the tapeworm Anemotaenia brevis. The worm enters the ant's body at the larval stage and begins to change its host from the inside. But it does nothing crude. It does not devour organs, does not destroy the brain, does not turn the ant into a walking corpse. It does something much more subtle and, upon reflection, much more eerie. The infected ant, begins to live longer than healthy ones. It works less. It receives more food from its fellow ants. They feed it as if it is somehow important, and it becomes lighter in color. Its body literally changes hue. The parasite transforms the worker into a privileged dependent, sitting in the nest, eating at others' expense, and standing out visually. Why does the worm do all this? Because the ultimate host of the worm is a bird. It needs the ant to be noticed and eaten. The lighter coloration makes the infected ant more visible against the backdrop of its dark companions. And the fact that the ant is healthy and well-fed ensures that the parasite inside will also be in good shape by the time the bird pecks. This is not a crude takeover. It is a quiet restructuring of another organism for its own purposes, and the ant is completely unaware of it. But if parasites are a hidden threat, then war among ants is open, organized, and utterly ruthless. This is best illustrated by the ants Megaponera analis from Africa. These ants specialize in one food source, termites. They do not gather seeds, do not milk aphids, do not cultivate fungi. They attack termite mounds, and they do this with a precision that resembles military planning. First, a scout locates an active termite mound. It returns to the nest and assembles a squad of a strictly defined size, between 200 and 500 individuals, depending on the target. No more, no less. The column advances to the termite mound in an organized march. When they reach the site, the larger workers, soldiers, begin to breach the walls of the mound. The smaller workers wait for a gap to appear and slip inside, where they grab termites and pull them out. The larger ones guard the entrance and fend off soldier termites trying to patch the wall. The entire operation lasts just a few minutes, after which the column retreats. And here's the detail that makes these ants unique among all insects. After the battle, they collect the wounded. This is not a figure of speech. An ant that has lost one or more legs in a fight with termites releases two specific chemical substances, dimethyl disulfide and dimethyl trisulfide. This scent is a distress signal, and healthy ants respond to it unequivocally. They pick up the wounded and carry them home. A study from 2017 revealed that without this signal, the wounded ant is abandoned. It simply becomes invisible to rescuers. However, if the signal is present, they are almost always picked up. Once home, the injured ant recovers and returns to duty within a few days. An ant with 3 legs out of 6 can still participate in raids. Scientists calculated that this system of rescuing the wounded increases the combat effectiveness of the entire colony by approximately 30%. Ants do not save the injured out of sympathy. They do it because it is advantageous. Training a new fighter from scratch is more costly than repairing an old one. In 2018, a species known to local researchers for a long time was officially described on the island of Borneo, Colobopsis explodens. The name speaks for itself. Workers of the smaller caste of this species, when confronted with a threat, contract their abdominal muscles so intensely that their bodies explode. A yellow toxic secretion with a sharp, spice-like odor is ejected from the wound. It covers the attacker, glues its limbs together, and often proves fatal. The ant that performs this act dies instantly. But here's an important detail. Only the small workers explode. Larger individuals of the same species do not. The system sacrifices those who are easier and cheaper to replace, while conserving those in whom more resources have been invested. This is not a conscious choice made by an individual ant. It is evolutionary arithmetic encoded in their genes. And one last example from this section, which sounds like a spy thriller. Carpenter ants from the genus Camponotus, upon discovering a foreign scout in their territory, sometimes do not attack it. Instead, they do something more sophisticated. They cover it with their own hydrocarbons, the very substances that form the chemical signature of each colony. The scout returns home alive and unharmed, but it now smells like an enemy. When it arrives back at its nest, its own kind does not recognize it. To them, it is an outsider, and they eliminate it. The opposing colony loses a scout, expends resources on an internal conflict, and receives a false signal that the enemy has already infiltrated. One action, and three problems for the opponent. This is counterintelligence. In insects with brains the size of a grain of sand. When we talk about agriculture, we usually refer to what humans invented around 12,000 years ago in what is now the Middle East. This marks a pivotal moment in the history of our civilization, the shift from foraging to farming, from a nomadic lifestyle to a settled one, from small groups to cities. We take pride in this achievement, and rightly so. However, leafcutter ants began practicing agriculture approximately 60 million years ago. They were doing this while the last descendants of dinosaurs roamed the earth, and long before the first primates appeared. Their agricultural system is so advanced that it includes an element that humanity only developed in the 20th century: biological pest control. Here's how it works. Leafcutter ants cut pieces of leaves, bring them back to their nest, chew them into a pulp, and place them in specialized chambers known as gardens. A fungus grows on this pulp, and it is the fungus that serves as the colony's sole food source. The ants do not eat the leaves. Instead, they cultivate a fungal crop, tending to it, removing infected areas, and controlling humidity and temperature. This is true farming, but every farm has its enemies, and the ants is no exception. The parasitic fungus Ascovopsis is a specialized invader that specifically targets the fungal gardens cultivated by leafcutter ants. It reappears time and again, and if left unchecked, it can destroy the crop, leading to the demise of the entire colony. This is where things get particularly interesting. On the bodies of leafcutter ants, in specialized areas of their cuticle, live bacteria of the genus Pseudonocardia. These bacteria produce an antibiotic that specifically suppresses Ascovopsis while leaving the primary crop fungus unharmed. The ants carry around a living pharmaceutical factory that produces a targeted medicine for a specific disease affecting their harvest. This results in a triple alliance that has existed for tens of millions of years: the farmer ant, the crop fungus, and the protective bacteria. Three entirely different organisms are so tightly interconnected that none can survive without the other two. And here's a detail that has caught the attention of pharmaceutical companies worldwide. Over tens of millions of years, the parasitic fungus Ascovopsis has never developed resistance to the antibiotic produced by these bacteria. Tens of millions of years, and the medicine still works. In comparison, our antibiotics begin to lose effectiveness after decades, sometimes even years. Hospital bacteria are becoming resistant to drugs at an alarming rate, and this is one of the major medical challenges of our century. Meanwhile, the ants possess an antibiotic that has been effective for longer than our species has existed. Scientists are currently studying it as a potential basis for new medications, and this is not an abstract idea. It is an active area of research. But ants are not just farmers, they are also herders. You have likely heard of aphids, small insects that sit on plants and suck sap. Ants farm aphids like cattle. They protect them from predators, move them to fresh shoots, and in return, collect their sweet secretions, honeydew. But aphids are just the beginning. In addition to them, ants also farm mealybugs, leafhoppers, and even certain caterpillars. Ants of the species Acropyga do something that astonished entomologists when it was first documented. When a young Acropyga queen leaves her nest for a mating flight, the one and only flight after which she must establish a new colony from scratch, she carries a female mealybug in her jaws, a living livestock packed for the move. This is the only known case in the insect world where where a new colony is founded with another species as a resource. The queen does not yet know if she will thrive. She does not yet know if the first workers will survive. But she always takes the mealybug, because without it, there will be no food. Now, let's discuss the dark side of the ant world, the invaders that disrupt ecosystems. On Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean, an ecological disaster was caused by a single species, the yellow crazy ant, Anoplolopus gracilis. It was accidentally introduced, likely through cargo, and found ideal conditions on the island: warmth, humidity, abundant food, and no natural enemies. Within a few years, it decimated the population of red land crabs. These crabs were not just one of the species on the island. They were a keystone species. They processed fallen leaves, controlled the growth of underbrush, and maintained soil structure. When the crabs disappeared, the forest began to change. The underbrush thickened, the plant species composition shifted, and the soil changed. One species of ant triggered a chain reaction that restructured an entire island ecosystem. And this is not an isolated incident. Invasive ants are among the most destructive species on the planet, and every year brings new stories of territories where they have displaced all native species. But there are even more sophisticated invaders, those that operate from within rather than from the outside. The parasitic queen, Solenopsis daguerre, has no workers of her own, not a single one. It infiltrates the colony of fire ants, some of the most aggressive ants on the planet, and somehow goes unnoticed. It chemically suppresses the ability of the host queen to reproduce and redirects the entire workforce of the colony to raise its own offspring. But its offspring consists solely of new parasitic queens and males, not a single worker. The colony continues to operate at full capacity. The workers build, feed, and defend. Yet every new creature that emerges from this nest belongs to the invader. This is not war. It is a takeover without a single act of open confrontation. The colony functions perfectly, unaware that it is working for an outsider. Now, let's talk about those who have adapted to conditions that seem impossible for survival. In the Sahara, ants of the genus Cataglyphus thrive, and their survival strategy is based on one simple principle. They emerge to the surface when everyone else is hiding. The ground temperature exceeds 60 degrees. Lizards are in their burrows. Spiders seek shade. Birds do not fly. Yet Cataglyphus runs, and it runs at a frantic speed, up to 1 meter per second. For a creature that is only 1 centimeter long, this is equivalent to 200 kilometers per hour on a human scale. It runs because it has a window of just a few minutes before its body overheats to a critical point. During this time, it must find a dead insect, grab it, and return home. And how it returns, that is a separate story that makes scientists shake their heads in disbelief. Cataglyphus navigates using the polarized light of the sun to determine direction while simultaneously counting its own steps. It has a built-in pedometer that records each step and calculates the distance to the nest. Scientists tested this with an experiment that sounds like a joke, but it is genuine scientific work. They attach tiny stilts, fine bristles that lengthen each step, to the ant's legs. The ants on stilts miss the nest by exactly the amount predicted by the mathematical model of step counting. They took the same number of steps, but each step was longer, causing them to pass by the entrance, unaware that they were already home. A built-in navigator that operates on pure arithmetic, without satellites, without maps, without landmarks in a desert where there are none at all. And when you put all of this together, agriculture, animal husbandry, antibiotics, the takeover of foreign colonies, navigation by pedometer in a 60-degree desert, you begin to understand that you are not just looking at insects. You are witnessing a parallel civilization that has tackled the same challenges we face, but with entirely different methods and tens of millions of years earlier. We began this conversation by discussing how you crush ants with your finger and pour boiling water on them. We explored their biology, their wars, their agriculture, and their parasites. Now it's time to talk about what they do for you. Not for nature in general, not for some abstract ecosystem, but personally for you. Because without ants, the world you live in would look completely different, and you wouldn't like it. In Brazil, there is a type of landscape known as the Cerrado, a tropical savanna with sparse trees and thick grass. Scientists conducted an experiment there that sounds simple, but the results were significant. They fenced off plots of land to prevent ants from accessing them. Not all insects, but specifically ants. The control plots nearby were left untouched. After 2 years, the difference was visible to the naked eye. The soil in the ant-free plots became 23% denser. Water stopped being absorbed properly. Infiltration decreased. The amount of organic carbon in the topsoil dropped. The land literally hardened and impoverished in just 2 years without ants. It turned out that ants, not earthworms, as many believe, were the main factor maintaining soil porosity and health in this region. Each of their tunnels serves as a channel for air and water. Every piece of organic matter dragged underground acts as fertilizer. Remove the ants, and the land begins to suffocate. But this is just a local story. There is a larger scale, a planetary one. A study from 2014 showed that ants accelerate a process known as chemical weathering of minerals. When certain minerals in the soil, silicates, break down, they bind carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This is one of the natural mechanisms by which the planet regulates the amount of carbon in the air. And ants speed up this process by 50 to 300 times compared to bare soil without living organisms. 50 to 300 times. They dig tunnels, change soil acidity, and move minerals between layers, resulting in a chemical reaction that, under normal conditions, takes thousands of years, being accelerated to scales that matter for the climate. Ants could be one of those unnoticed participants in the global system that have helped the planet avoid overheating for tens of millions of years. And we are just beginning to understand this. Another fact that few people know: in the forests of eastern North America, about 30% of herbaceous understory plants depend on ants as their sole means of seed dispersal. Trillium, violets, bloodroot, these plants attach a small nutrient packet called an elaeosome to each seed. An ant finds the seed, and it is only interested in that packet. It drags the seed into its nest, bites off the elaeosome, and discards the seed in a refuse chamber. The refuse chamber is a warm, moist place filled with organic waste. Ideal conditions for germination. The plant literally tricks the ant into planting it in the best soil at the optimal depth. Without ants, these 30% of forest plants would be unable to occupy new territories. They would become stuck in place, and after a few generations, they would begin to degenerate from genetic uniformity. The forest where you stroll in spring and admire the violets exists in its current form because ants carry their seeds to new locations every year. We also utilize ants in areas you might not have considered. Forensic scientists apply them in forensic entomology, a field that helps determine the circumstances of someone's death through insects. Different species of ants appear at various stages of decomposition in a predictable sequence, and by noting which species are present and which are not, specialists can determine how much time has passed. This is a grim application, but it aids in solving cases that would otherwise remain unsolved. In the world of technology, ants have inspired ideas that are now functioning in the systems you use every day. Engineers from Harvard created a swarm of 1,000 miniature robots called kilobots. Each robot is the size of a coin, and it does not know the overall task. It can only do 3 things: move, blink a light, and notice the lights of its neighbors. Yet from 1,000 such primitive units, acting according to local rules, complex shapes emerge: stars, letters, any specified forms. The principle is the same as with ants. No one knows the big picture. Each reacts only to its nearest neighbors, and the result arises on its own. Ant algorithms are not just academic curiosities. They are used in the logistics systems of the world's largest warehouses to optimize delivery routes. They operate in telecommunications networks, distributing loads among nodes. They help create flight schedules, where thousands of variables must be considered simultaneously: crews, airplanes, airports, weather, and connection times. Every time a task becomes too complex for a direct solution, engineers increasingly turn to a model that ants have been refining for 100 million years. And now we have reached the conclusion, and I want to express the reason this entire narrative was crafted. We began with annoyance, tiny insects invading the kitchen and ruining a picnic. Then we realized that behind this irritation lies a system of such complexity that our best engineers are still trying to replicate it. I want to conclude with a thought that I believe is more significant than all the facts we have discussed today. Ants, independently of us, arrived at agriculture, at animal husbandry, at architecture, at medicine, at organized military actions. They accomplished everything we did, but 60 million years earlier and in a completely different way. In biology, this is referred to as convergent evolution, when similar challenges give rise to comparable solutions in organisms that are not related. Eyes evolved independently in dozens of different groups of animals. Wings appeared in insects, birds, and bats separately. And just like that, civilization, a set of solutions for living in large groups, emerged at least twice on one planet. Once among primates with large brains. Another time among insects with brains containing 250,000 neurons. And here's what follows from this. And this is perhaps the most alarming yet simultaneously the most inspiring conclusion. Complexity does not require consciousness. Intelligent behavior, strategy, planning, adaptation, coordination among millions of participants can arise from a set of simple rules, as long as a sufficient number of agents adhere to those rules. No ant knows it is part of a civilization. No ant thinks about the future of the colony. No ant understands why it carries that seed or feeds that larva. But together they have built a system that has survived 5 mass extinctions, populated the entire planet, and processed billions of tons of soil. Perhaps the most important lesson ants teach us is not how similar they are to us, but that something very much like civilization can exist without a single thought about it. So the next time you see a tiny black dot crawling across the table, maybe it's not worth squashing. Maybe it's worth pausing for just a second to consider that this dot is part of a system that has been functioning long before you and will continue to do so long after. I would appreciate your subscription to the channel and a like on the video. Thank you for watching.